Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Public History and Arts. My name is Myriam, her name is Nada, and together we are doing this series of interviews with practitioners, public historians, cultural workers, and artists to try and navigate what brings together history and arts in their work. We are very happy to be hosting today Mũthoni Mwangi. Hi, Mũthoni.
Hello, how are you?
We're good. How are you?
I am here and I'm glad to be here. Yeah.
Thank you for giving us the time to meet today. We're really excited about this conversation. I'm gonna start by introducing Mũthoni for those of you who don't know her. And then we're gonna give the floor to Mũthoni to say a few words. And then we're gonna navigate the conversation between a question from Nada, another from me, and a couple more answers and really important information from our guest. So let's do this. Mũthoni Mwangi is a multidisciplinary artist researcher working at the intersection of African philosophy, cultural heritage, and community development. Her approach is mostly experimental and grounded in the spirit of community building and community care. Z is a cultural worker in a space and time where cultural erasure is rampant. She is a memory worker in a space where histories and epistemologies are obfuscated and strategically erased. Mũthoni, your bio maybe says it all. We are working in times that are beyond difficult to navigate. For anyone who's involved in the public sphere, for anyone who cares about people's history, and for anyone who has a conscience that they don't want to shut down yet. So I'm actually very happy and proud that we're having this moment to discuss with you your work and your practice and how you center the public in your inquiry and how your inquiry is related to the present day, but also to the past. Thank you, Mũthoni, for speaking to us today.
Thank you, Miriam, and thank you, Nada, for creating this space. I think before we begin, I would like to start with an acknowledgement of the historical times within which we live. As in the moment when we're having this conversation, it is 26th of June, 2025. Yesterday, it was 1 year since the 25th of June, 2024, which is significant to Kenya because this is when the Gen Z youth of Kenya led a revolution. We went to parliament, we said we don't want this finance bill, we used our voice, we organized with each other, and we lost some people. So yesterday we attempted to have a protest in their memory to commemorate them, and we were met with police brutality, along with media gags, where the government issued directives for media houses to stop reporting what was happening in the CBD, to stop live reporting what was happening in the CBD. What we're seeing is the use of the same colonial tactics used during the state of emergency in 1952 in our country. And so because of this, I think this conversation is super important to the context so that we can understand how archiving and public history can help people living in the global majority, in the global south, to access their histories, to help them read better the times in which they live in, to organize and to imagine freer and better worlds for each other. Yes. That's from me.
Thank you so much, Mũthoni. I mean, this is very important, and I mean, like we live in a very critical moment in the global south and in the world, and I don't know, it couldn't be more intense than having this conversation right after this very important day for Kenya and the Kenyan people, and for you as like a curator and a practitioner.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we can connect all these things together, your work and the historical moment we're living in. Um, let me start with like a general question, and that would be like, could you walk us through the process of building the community element in your work as a curator? Like, do you start with the historical or the archival aspect, like the research, and then you think of the artistic medium, and then of the language, or does it happen differently depending on the topic or the subject or the project?
I think for me, I can say community, the communal aspect of my making starts with where I began my questions on history, on particularly our Kenyan history, which is African digital heritage, um, under the mentorship of Tayana Maina, headstrong historian, who is very passionate about documenting um, our Kenyan history and making it accessible so that we can better understand the times in which we live in. That being said, the curatorial roles I have undertaken have always been done in collaboration, a co-curatorship. And so I think for me, this process allows us to think a thought together, to think big, big thoughts together, because as you have mentioned aptly, that the moments, the times in which we're living in demand us to hold on to each other and to be together, because truly community is all we have. So from the very inception of an idea, my process involves working with people from no thoughts that I think or have thought are thought in isolation, thought and executed in isolation. The process, on the second part of the question about the process, it mostly begins with archival research through desktop research. Because of where we live, um, access to archives is quite difficult, especially the archives that hold the historical information of who we are, what are our cultures, because we were studied to be understood so that we may be better oppressed, so the records are not with us. So it often begins with desktop research through looking through online open access archives, but also going on the ground to the Kenya National Archives or to Macmillan Library. Those are some places that I would recommend. And then doing some literature reviews. Once that's done, then it's easier to understand. Sorry, before the desktop research, the research that I have undertaken, is always in service of an output or an artistic output or a body of work. It's research that either feeds um, a documentary. It'll live as a blog post. It'll live as a digital platform. It'll live as a maybe 3D reconstruction in the end. So that also the fact that we're thinking about accessibility from the beginning creates a community. It creates space to think community as we make, because you're not making this text that's going to be in a book, or you're not writing, which is good, that's important. You're not writing a text to be published, but you're writing something that at the end of the day is going to be enjoyed by or accessed by the community. So that allows you to think community from the beginning. And then we go into the looking into the archives, desktop research, literature reviews, and then all of that. And then depending on the nature of the project, as we'll see with the coming through virtual reconstruction, it could be a collective community memory project, which then involves actively um, speaking to their consent, especially because the work we do is centered in community care. We want whatever we produce at the end to be respectful of the wishes of the source communities, to be something that honors their existence. So I think that's how I would say I have felt and experienced community in terms of my work.
Muthoni, maybe building on that and what you mentioned in the introduction, you reference the past and the present, and you see the value of the past in the present day. You're a curator, so it's like you're always balancing, looking up um, the the past or history and bringing it to the people nowadays. How do you how do you balance this role between juggling the timeline of past and present? And how do you also balance your role as a researcher, but also as a link to the public? You just mentioned you want to be relevant to the community, but also to be respectful of the community, when sometimes research tends to be really hard to grasp or not easily understandable because of the jargon or the language or the places where this research was saved, as you said. We don't have access to it. How do you do this navigation constantly as a curator?
I think to begin again with ADH, Africa, the work at African Digital Heritage, we like to say that the what we do is a restorative process. This is a combination of history and restoration. This is because of reading, we understand the moment in which we live in, and we understand that we live inside these colonial wounds, whether we admit it or not. We are just curious about how to tend to them, and hence the restorative process. So then accessing the archive is not a matter of accessing the archive again is a matter of survival. It's a matter of I'm going to look for something that can help me live better right now. There's a South African sound artist researcher called Nombuso Matibela, who we had on one of our public history talks, who says, who holds a question as she approaches the archive: how can we breathe better? I think this approach of restoration gives space for the hands to allow us to move in a way that allows us to breathe better. Um, in terms of yeah, so that maybe answers the question on the past and the present. It's a movement between going to the past and reading the past to see what's useful for us now. It's kind of like there's a poem by Adrienne Rich that's called Diving to the Wreck, where she said, I came to see the damage that was done, but the treasures that prevail. So it's a matter of looking at this wreck to actively search for the treasures that prevail, the treasures that can help us survive this current now and that we can pass on for people to survive the future then. Um, then in terms of bridging that gap between the researcher and the curator, it's all, I think for me, in terms of accessibility. For me, as a young researcher, I made possible because Chao was curious and Chao followed her curiosities. So then my attempt is to make more people possible through my curiosities. So then how does my work make it that generate interest, one, in our histories, and then make make some of those difficult histories more accessible. How I do this in my personal life is through my poetry and also my zine making. Zines are a very important form for me because it's a DIY form, so a DIY form of self-publishing. It's very easy. You have a sheet of paper, you fold it, you write what you want on the zine. So through collage work, I've been able to make a zine that I feel represents this work, this desire. Um, I don't know if I've completely answered your question. I feel like I have a bit more to say in terms of the research and the curation. I think research is so central to the curatorial process, especially if you're trying to um, create more accessibility and generate interest to reach your audiences. Your work has to be grounded in research. So, for example, with the zine that I'm talking about, the Kamirithu um, A Harambe of Sweat, the story of Kamiritu community theater. Let me just turn off my background. This little zine. It began out of the Kamiritu virtual digital reconstruction. So then for me, my zines are that place where after the research is all said and done and the project is done, there's still, for me, it feels there's still always something to be said. There's still a bit more to be said. So I find myself channeling that through crafting and through finding ways to share these stories with my friends, with people who are a bit curious about their histories. And in terms of the moving back and forth between history and the present now, it's a matter for me of staying rooted in the body. Because I exist within these communities, then it's a matter of what can help me survive, but also what can help other people around me survive. Um, be it music, be it our art, and then how can we highlight these things? How can we keep those treasures close and share them with each other? Yeah. Mhm.
Oh, I really like your answer, Mutuni, and I think the connection Miriam is making here is actually like why we talk about public history and art and like this is why it's relevant more than anything else. And I mean, I would like to use this as a segue to pass to my next question because it involves this element exactly, like the public and the making of history. So, I mean, you already started talking about the Kamiroto Theater. So maybe I would ask you to like elaborate a bit more and tell us more about the process of recreating it virtually. And also ask you how did the public co-create it with you? Um,
Mhm.
and then maybe move from that to like how do you see or view the role of the public in history making, especially when we think about this like unilateral I don't know, like one voice exclusive extract. I mean, the one that extract and oppress other voices. Like there is like this official historical narrative, and like where's the public in history making?
Okay. Before I tell you about the Kamiritu project, let me tell you about Kamiritu, the place itself, and the Kamiritu Community Educational Center and Theater. The Kamiritu Community Educational Center, from which the theater emerged, cultural center and theater, yeah, from which the theater emerged. The KC, sorry, the Kamiritu Community Educational and Cultural Center, the KCECC, from which the Kamiritu Theater emerged. Kamiritu is a small town outside of Nairobi, near in Limuru, outside of Nairobi. Why Kamiritu is important is because Kamiritu was one of the villages during villagization. I talked briefly about the state of emergency earlier in relation to police brutality and the strategies that the state is using right now. During the state of emergency, certain groups certain groups in the country were were gathered in these internment camps, concentration style internment camps, which were established in order to cut off communications with the Mau Mau forest fight, the Kenya Land and Freedom Army forest fighters. And so Kamiritu was one of these villages, one of these emergency concentration villages. Now, when we gained independence, not much changed. Actually, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who was central to this Kamiritu project, is quoted for saying, Kamiritu hasn't changed much since its emergency origins. Poverty is still king. Um, so even after we gain independence, the people living in these villages who are peasant farmers still remained within those conditions. Nothing changed within those material conditions of poverty. And they were facing land grabbing. So the land on which the community theater was built was community land. There used to be a social hall there. And in Limuru, there were a lot of um, middle class and upper middle class people who are land grabbing. And so, as a strategy to keep this public land, they decided that we will have a community theater. But also, this community theater came from an adult literacy program. Remember, I've said that the people living in Kamiritu were peasant farmers. They did not have much education. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, at that time, who lived near Kamirithu, um, was a teacher at UN. We all know we all know a little bit about Ngugi. He was a teacher at UN. So the story goes that a woman, Mrs. Amon, went to him one Sunday, and he went to his house incessantly. And one Sunday found him and asked him, "We hear that you have a lot of education and write books. Why don't you and others of your kind give give some of that education to the village? We don't want the whole amount of it, just a little and a little of your time." And from here is when Ngugi wa Thiong'o and Ngugi wa Mire gathered their colleagues from the University of Nairobi and went to Kamirithu. And for them, they were not going to Kamirithu as colonized intellectuals to go and teach the people. They were also learning. They were learning about their culture. And so they taught the people of Kamirithu how to read and write. And from these lessons on reading and writing, they wrote the script of the play. The play that we're speaking of is Gahika Deda, I Will Marry When I Want, which covered themes of land grabbing, um, a young woman who is being pushed into marriage for for kind of social climbing within the family, which were themes that emerged from the work itself. And so they used music from their culture, and of course, because of the history in which they lived, the liberation struggle 1952 to 1956 featured the Mau Mau uprising featured. Um, Again, Kamirithu, as we've seen, Kamirithu was set up as an internment camp, um, one of those villages that was set up as part of the plan. The plan the plan being the New Villages program of 1950 that was also used in Malaysia as well. So this was a strategy employed by the empire across in different places that they had colonized. And so they put on display to they they had the classes, they wrote the script, and then they built the theater actually. They built the theater with their hands. And in a paper, Ross Kidd calls it a harambe of sweat because they said they don't want to do harambes are basically crowdfunding that we do in Kenya, that's often done in Kenya. And how it would traditionally happen is you'd call like more wealthy people of the community and ask them to donate money to your cause. For them, they said they were not going to ask for money from any of the rich members of the society. They were going to donate what they had, and they found the wood, they found everything, and they built the theater themselves with their hands. It was an open air theater. And after building the theater, they put up the play. And when they put up the play here, they pulled in such large audiences. People would come from Nairobi. Where is it? The first play opened on the 2nd of October, 1977, and ran for 7 weeks, attracting an audience of 2,000 from surrounding villages and Nairobi every Saturday and Sunday. But inevitably, this play was banned because of the themes it was covering. Remember, this is 1977, um, going into 1980s. So the play was banned because of the themes, and the KCEC's license was revoked and was disbanded. And it is from here that Ngugi got arrested. And yeah, it's from here that Ngugi got arrested when they tried to put up the play in the Kenya National Theatre. When they tried to put up the play in the Kenya National Theatre, they found that the doors had been locked. Um, and they couldn't stage the play there, so they had to stage it in UN. And then from there is when Ngugi got arrested. And even after he was arrested, his family, because they lived close, and the KCC was disbanded and the theater was razed to the ground, and they built a police station on it and later a polytechnic, which is it's very interesting. And even while he's in prison, he writes about how the community still took care of his family and they still showed up for his family, including giving his child a name when she was born as he was in detention. So the strength of Kamirithu for me is in this community organizing aspect. The play was the play, the theater, the art was an offshoot of the community organizing. Yeah. And so when we were doing the virtual reconstruction, interestingly, the original cast, some of the original cast members are still alive. So when we were doing the virtual reconstruction, which was part of a project we were invited into by Makau Kitata and Professor Kenny Kabars, they were doing a documentary on the afterlives of Kamirithu, and as part of that, they wanted us to do a virtual reconstruction of the theater. So because these actors were still alive, we began the process as usual, some desktop research by reading from Ngugi's books about the descriptions of the theater, his letters when he was in detention about the description of the theater. The play itself is also published, so that was a source of archival imagery. The archival images, as you see, used in this zine. Um, And yeah, some of the archival images used here are from the book itself. And so because these people are still alive, we spoke to our elders. We spoke to them at every point. We started the reconstruction with an idea, maybe a sketch from what we read in the books, but we had different drafts. After the first draft, based on what we read in the book, we sent it over to them and we asked them, does this accurately represent what you remember? And then they gave us feedback and we made the changes. And then we returned again, we sent them again and asked, does this accurately represent what you remember? And they gave us feedback and we made changes based on that. And then the last iteration, we went to Kamirithu itself and we showed them and we sat with them and they told us stories of that time, as they were doing the work with the theater and the community center. And it was such a lovely time to gather together with our elders and just listen and listen to them and listen to their stories and to have this offering of a digital reconstruction and to see them remember and be like, oh, that was me on stage, or that's where so and so used to act and say this. That's why we'd sing. That's why we'd change because there was a changing room at the back. And I think through that story, you can see like the importance of the community memory, the collective memory, and how the community we play a role in remembering. We remember together. It's a lie that we've been told for so long that there's only one account of history. That's a lie. Um, we have we know we know it in our bodies. We know it through how we remember that we hold this moment of history together. And so reconstructing this moment of history from different points of view for me is very central to my practice as a researcher, yeah, and curator. I think collective memory is something that we're only beginning to understand and to tap into collective memory through projects like this, where you actually speak to the elders and ask, what do you remember? But also through our songs and through our traditions. And so I think for me, Kamirithu was the first place I was like, whoa, actually, it's possible. It's possible to remember together and to hold these different fragments of memory. And even if someone forgets and there'll be someone else to be like, no, 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 that's not how it happened. It's like remember, it was like this, and we can remind each other. And I think for me, that's where the true power lies. Yeah. I hope I've answered your question.
You did. You did. And I mean, like your answer and like the story of the theater and the recreation of the theater, couldn't be more symbolic. I mean, from start to end, when you say they demolished it and they put a police station, like it can't be more symbolic than that. That violence has like this corporeal um I don't know, value. It's there. You see it. It's a building. It's in the bricks. It's not just in the beating. It's just like on this ability to be able to oppress to that extent. And then like the
Mm.
idea of having a theater itself is it's fascinating, because I mean people say life is like a theater, but this is an actual theater that represented life and encompassed this these fantastic attempts from the community to do, like, by the community, for the community, to give and to include. I mean, it's everything. I'm very happy to hear this story from you, and I don't know why the story about the woman who asked him to like give just a little bit of his knowledge. This is so heartwarming, and it tears my eyes. I don't know. Go ahead, Miriam.
Um, Mũthoni, I'm so glad we spoke about this example because of the work you've done and the team on reconstructing this theater, but also because of the existence of this theater in history, which is going to be, and I'm not over describing. This is an example that's going to serve a lot of communities, a lot of different contexts, a lot of countries that are struggling with how do we claim the space to hold sort of a protest, but in an artistic form. And this is what theater has always been. Like, theater is, how can I have people gather in a place, speak about something to be emancipatory on change without calling it a protest? And this is an amazing example drawn from the 70s, from the people of Kamitiru, that is, like, it teaches us a lot on collective action to claim back your space, to speak about subjects, to share knowledge, and to make this knowledge available for everybody. You want to show up, you show up. It's in the street, it's out there, it's public. It's not like a closed space, it's an open air space. And to have to go back to the communities and to the people who are still living, who used to act in these places, to speak to them is a validation of their experience, but also a restructuring of how do we speak about the history that's been silenced. We're going to include visuals from the reconstruction that you did, and I'm really happy we spoke about this example, and I'm really happy that I learned about it, just like Nada said. So building on that example of how community has agency to claim their space and their time and their history, and how when we collectively try to share the knowledge that we have, a lot of things could change and the impact of what we do is multiplied. Maybe you could speak to us about, because you mentioned making zines and how zines are one of your mediums that you like to use, because it's an easy way to share your feelings and your stories, and it's really accessible, and it's also easily taught. And you've done this before, like you've led workshops on zine making. I think it was for the project Sites of Resistance. So maybe tell us, through that experience, how do you incorporate the educational part in your work as a curator? And what I mean is, how do you also use the tools that you know and the skills that you have to get people to do similar things even when you're not in that space? So you give them the tools, you try and show them how you do it, and then you let it be. How do you incorporate this part of knowledge sharing or educational component of skills sharing?
I think, um, hmm, Let's see. Firstly, the project was for the Kla Arts Festival, which is an art festival in Kampala. It was published on the Sites of Resistance as partners of 32 Degrees East. However, it was part of the Kla Arts, and the particular work you're referring to is What About Mending, which was an improvisational paper kilt that followed a week of workshops with some artists in Kampala. This was important to me to um, test an idea, a sense that the gathering is the medicine. That when we come together and we craft and we speak to each other about our experience, that is the medicine. That is the healing. That is where we find healing together. For me, zines are important as because of their history, their radical history of like publishing. Zines are small 8-page self-published books. Anyone can make a zine. From my little niece who's 8 years old to my mom, anyone can make a zine. And a zine gives you that freedom once you have the page to put whatever you want inside this zine. So for me, zine making then becomes a way to, as I mentioned earlier, generate interest and curiosity in our histories, but also do it in a low production way that allows anyone to do it. Because I find with academic writing, a lot of our histories or our stories themselves, the stories that we tell, are we find them in academic papers written about us, not for us. And so zines for me are a way to write for us, to write against this canon for us, and to invite other people to do so as well. The paper kilt was a really cool experiment because it was an attempt to see what would happen if every day we sat and gathered and talked about the theme was care instructions. So we were looking at how do we care for ourselves? What does care mean? Who gets to decide what care means also? How do we hold each other? Which all these being such important questions for community organizing on the ground right now. Um, and ways we reclaim our emotional labor too, from always fighting with the machine to tending to the hearts and minds that are fighting with the machine, yes, but are also trying to build lives, trying to build lives that they want to stay alive for. Which is what freedom means to me, to be honest. Freedom to me means building a life I want to stay alive for. And so then zine making becomes a place to gather and to hold these questions together and to attempt to find answers because as we saw with this Kamirito example, it's about collective memory. It's it's a lie that we've believed for so long that one person can hold the most accurate account of what happened. We hold it together. One person, one institution, we hold it together as the people in the community. That is how we reclaim our agency. That is how we say that this is our story. Don't write another story about us. This is the one we want you to pay attention to because we have written it. We have done the research and we have talked to each other. We have talked to our elders. So then for me, that's the place zine making takes a way to invite other people into this making, invite them into this questioning, into this curiosity about the conditions in which we live. Because again, the process itself, the process of encountering history is historative. The one I subscribe to is historative. I'm not going back to history and wading through these horrendous moments just to witness the brutality and the violence and retell it over and over again. I'm going there in search of stories that can keep us alive, examples that can show us that what you're going through now, other people have gone through that, and this is how they navigated it, so that we too can learn how to navigate the now in which we're in. So zine making offers the space for that. It offers a medium in which we can share with each other and yeah, and just say like, hey, this is something I'm curious about. In a playful way, you had asked, there was a question on play, because also encountering the archive can be a very difficult process for someone in a body like this, for someone who is reading things written about me and about my people. It can be a very grief-filled process. And zines offer a place to move through that grief in a way that creates something beautiful at the end of the day and something that can be shared and something informative too. Yeah. So I think that's why I stay with zines because also they're just so much fun. I don't know if you've ever folded a zine. I would recommend that you fold a zine. There's a moment when the paper just comes together and it's lovely. And yeah, we should all be making zines to be honest. Yeah.
Thank you. I really want to continue this interview until it becomes a 2 hour long interview. But I also know
It'll be a
that,
documentary.
I swear, but I also know that what you said already is going to get people to think, to reflect. The examples you gave are informative, again, for so many people going through so much around the world, and you said it yourself. Sometimes we need to know that other people went through this because we don't see the light at the end of the tunnel when you're living in something and you're like this can't be like there's so much cruelty. It's good to remind ourselves that other people made it. This is how they resisted. This is what they used. This is how they made it. This is how long it took. These were the sacrifices. These are the people we need to honor. This is how we reclaim it. This is how we reuse it. This is how we collectively can think of a life that we want to live. And I love your description of what freedom means to you because it spoke to me because I'm still thinking about what is it with this life that I wanna keep fighting for, and how does it look like? And I like it. It's like you hit a spot. Thank you so much for this conversation. Nada, final words before we go cry in the corner.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Watuni, very much. I I mean, I knew this interview was going to be I mean, difficult in the sense of like these are like really sore topics that we're talking about. And what makes them even more sore is that although we're talking about them in the context of history, we're also living them in our present, like literally as we are speaking, like genocides are happening. You're talking about the protest and police brutality that happened yesterday in commemoration of like an event that is technically like very very nearby history. It's not even something ancient, and this is tricky, and it's very. I think it takes a lot of willpower to be able to concentrate and to focus when like all what's happening is happening, and to be able to say yes, I am still going to go to archives, and yes, I'm still going to ask my elders in my community for how to narrate what happened, because this is the way to go. There isn't any vision for a future where we would just cut ties with what happened and say, oh yeah, blank new page, let's start a new world. This doesn't happen, and it's brutal that you and that you have to endure this while other things are happening that are like equally brutal and cruel. But it's also fascinating because like the work you're doing is fantastic, and it like the impact it leaves, I'm sure, on like I mean the impact is left on us, and we're just learning about it. We're not the ones who are creating it with our hands is magnificent. So I like I don't know, I want to applaud or something. So thank you so much for giving us the chance to have this very, very insightful conversation with you and about your work.
I would like to read from the last page of the zine about the people of Kamirithu. They teach us to reclaim our labor from capitalist exploitation and use it for community development. The people of Kamirithu give us a lesson on camaraderie and communal participation in cultural expression. They show us how to use the tools we have to build the futures we want through the use of theater, song, dance, music, and mime for political education and the redirection of their labor towards building of the open-air theater. Its relevance as a moment in history, as a project, is found within its success as a movement for community care and direct action to meet community needs and political education. Yeah. Thank you for the space to speak about this thing that's very close to my heart. Yeah.
Thank you, Mũthoni, and I'm so glad we have the space to discuss this, to continue amplifying the voices that are still resisting, still in their struggles, making their voices heard and the voices of other people. This series could not be more relevant nowadays. I keep saying this with every interview because every person that we interview has a big story, and this is why public history is relevant. This is why we do public history. This is why arts and culture is our medium. Thank you so much, everyone. This is going to be posted online. We're going to give you links to see the works that Mũthoni mentioned and also maybe to follow up on the work that she's doing with ADH and other equally cool, kick-ass initiatives. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.